Hey folks, welcome to week 9 of GID216, Motion Graphics for Interactive Media. How's everybody doing? Alright, so let's go to our modules. We'll go down to week 9, take a look at the week 9 overview. Okay, so this week is kind of a hodgepodge of stuff. We are going to do a quick review of narrative contraction and expansion. We took a look at this as one of the 9 tenets of visual literacy that we looked at the beginning of the semester. We're just going to do a quick review of it because we've kind of covered it a couple of different ways, but I just want to sort of put a button on it and make sure that we all understand it. So that's number 1. Number 2 is you've got a couple of consumables this week. There is this video here, The Magical Science of Storytelling, which is with David Phillips. He is sort of a storytelling expert, and this ties directly into sort of our motion graphics that we're working on and just talks about the general idea of telling stories from a scientific point of view. So that's that consumable, so be sure to watch that video. It's only about 16 minutes long. And then this one here is Visual Storytelling 101. Now this comes at storytelling from a much more practical filmmaking point of view, which again ties nicely into our motion graphics that we're working on. And so this is Visual Storytelling 101, specifically geared towards film and photography. So this has a more practical application than the one with David Phillips. But either way, they are both sort of helpful information on the art of storytelling and how to apply it to what you are working on. So watch both of those. Those are your consumables for the week. I will say the second one is about 13 minutes long, and like I said, the first one's only about 16 minutes long. So between the two of them, it's not a whole lot. Now, before we get to contraction and expansion, let's take a look at our ongoing assignment for the week. You have our third discussion board, so don't forget to participate in the discussion board. We're going to go over what that is in a second. And then we are going to get rolling on our next motion graphics project, which is a title sequence project. Now this one has multiple steps. It's a little longer. It's a little more complex than the two initial title sequence projects that we've worked on. The first one being to create a lower third. The second one being to create a lyric video. Here we're going to do some research. We're going to do a little bit of writing. And then we're going to go ahead and make a title sequence for our newly imagined movie or TV show. But we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so first things first, let's take a brief overview of narrative contraction and expansion. So we'll take a look here. So this is sort of the handout I have for narrative contraction and expansion. Now it's not very complex, but just to go over the concept again, the idea is that the more realistic and the more visually rich something is being presented, then that means that the story about it is also very complex and rich. Meaning that we looked at this photograph of the apple hanging in the orchard, and we imagined that if we started asking a lot of questions about it, then we can really tell a pretty expansive story about it. Like, where is the apple hanging? Is this an orchard? Where is the orchard located? Who owns the orchard? What time does that person get up in the morning to work the orchard? Does he have a family? Does she have a family? How many people work there? What is their story? And so on and so on and so on. What types of apples do they grow? What season do they usually do best in? What season do they struggle in? There are so many different questions you could ask, and the answers to all of those questions could provide you with a pretty rich backstory for a really large narrative. So over here in my little story meter, we can see that the story that goes behind this simple photograph can be pretty large, right? Then, of course, a more simplistic representation of the same thing gives you less story, right? Because here, yes, it's an apple, but it's an apple that's been photoshopped and it's being presented on a white background with a fake shadow. And it's kind of an idealistic version of an apple. And so there's really less questions to ask here, right? There's not as much rich information built into the photograph. And so while it could still have a pretty good story, the story gets maybe a little less complex. Then we get to this version of it. And now this is a drawing of an apple. And so we could ask questions about, who drew the apple and what media did they use. But at a certain point, we're going to sort of run out of questions that pertain to this particular representation of the apple. And so the story gets even smaller. Then once it's turned into a pictogram, well, it's just black on white. It's a graphic representation. There's really not a lot to ask about this. It's just a pictogram of an apple. Okay, that's fine. We get it. It's a pretty small story. But then we get to this pictogram of an apple, and while this is a very simplified pictogram, we also know that this is the logo for the Apple Computer Company. And so now you'll notice that the story meter goes way back up to a big story, because even though the visual representation of this is at its most simple, the story we could tell about it, the questions we could ask about it, become much more vast. And so when a simple pictogram goes from being a simple pictogram to being an icon and part of a logo for a well-known company, that changes the story. So that's what I mean by story contraction and expansion. The size and the complexity of the narrative can get larger and smaller in contrast to how complex the visual representation is, until it becomes a logo or part of their identity, and then it gets much bigger again. So hopefully you get the basic concept. This one's a little bit more conceptual than maybe some of the other areas of visual literacy, but I think it's important to understand. Okay, next, let's pop back over here and let's take a look at the discussion board that you guys are going to be participating in this week. So this is discussion board 3, which is right here. The title of this discussion board is Emotional Connection and Storytelling. Yes, it's directly related to the videos that we're watching this week. So storytelling snapshots throughout history. So here we have a handful of different sort of bulleted overviews on theories of storytelling. So we have the oral tradition, right, which you may have read about in history class. There's 3 bullets sort of discussing what the oral tradition is. There's the concept of person perception, which was popularized by a psychologist. There is the rest of the story, which was part of a radio show from many years ago. The importance of imagination. There's some snippets about that. And then putting it together, which was sort of a theory from Jean Piaget, who was a Swiss psychologist and philosopher, and a quote from George Lucas, you know, the guy that developed Star Wars. So all of those are about storytelling. They are different movements or historical moments or people's perspectives on the concept of storytelling. So read through those and think about them for a little bit, okay? So your directions are above, as we just mentioned, are some bulleted snapshots of a variety of interconnected storytelling concepts and practices from history. The oral tradition dates back to the beginning of mankind and the first spoken language. Meanwhile, Jean Piaget's work dates back to the 1900s, and of course we end with George Lucas, who was the creator of Star Wars, which came out in 1977 and continues through today. So your directions are that you are to think of a story from when you were a kid or from your youth of someone in your family that you know well. The story can be about anything, but should have some kind of emotional importance for you. It can be a funny story, it can be a serious story, it can be dramatic, it can be sad, whatever you'd like it to be. But make sure that it's a story that you know well, that you feel emotionally connected to. In your initial post, you are going to share that story with the class. Now, of course, make sure this is a story that you are comfortable sharing. You are sharing it on a discussion board in class. So while it should be a personal story, don't share something you're not comfortable sharing with. Make sure it's a story that you feel okay sharing with us, right? Write the story to the best of your ability. Make sure you use good grammar, good sentence structure, and keep it around 250 words. Nothing too big. Then, based on the bulleted snapshots above, tell us which one, or could be multiples, of those storytelling snapshots that you feel are relevant to the story that you just told us from your life. You can certainly do further research on any of those points or any of those people that are referenced above to help better explain your reasoning. Don't just necessarily go with your gut instinct. Do a little research into who Jean Piaget is or who George Lucas was and so on and so forth. So you're going to write that up, and again, that's sort of a response to your own initial post. Then, of course, as everybody posts their initial discussion posts a little later in the week, make sure that you respond to at least 2 of your classmates' initial posts, discussing your thoughts on the story that they shared and a little bit on the emotional historical connections that they made. And of course, the rest of the discussion guidelines are there as well. So you've got all week to work on this. Make sure you take time to read and consider these storytelling snapshots, and then do your best to share your story with us and attribute it to one of these. I would suggest watching the 2 videos this week, The Magic of Storytelling and Visual Storytelling 101, before you do the discussion board. They will sort of help to inform that conversation a little bit. So that is the main goal for this week. Okay, next we are introducing our next, and it's actually our final motion graphics project. So we're in week 9, so you're probably thinking, how is this our final project? Well, this is a multi-part project. We have a bunch of deliverables for this project. You can check out projects under modules and projects to really see how all the due dates work out. But let's take a look at the handout. So it is a title sequence project. We are making a title sequence, and we are going to deconstruct and reconstruct a genre. So first thing you're going to do is read this first page that just gives you a little overview about what genres, subgenres, and themes are. Now, if you've taken a creative writing class or a literature class, then you are probably familiar with what these are. But if not, this is a quick little overview talking about these 3 things. So make sure you read through that. Now, step 1 for the project is that you are going to choose a classic movie or television show and reimagine it as a different genre or subgenre. So that is our theme, classic movies and television reimagined. So basically we're making a remake, kind of. We're making a title sequence for a remake. So of course remakes are nothing new in Hollywood. There are dozens of them dating as far back as the 1930s. As of right now, there's over 121 movie remakes or reboots in the works. You see them all the time. New versions, sequels, prequels, whatever, they're always happening. On television, there seems to be a new remake almost monthly. Of course, some people will tell you that certain classics should never be remade, but we're going to do it anyway. So you're going to look at this list, and you're going to choose one of these classic television shows or movies, and you're going to learn a little bit about each one, and then you're going to choose your favorite, and we're going to do some reimagining. So here are your choices. The first one is the television show The Fugitive, which ran from 1963 to 1967. It is an action-adventure show. Then Adam 12 was a police procedural, kind of like NYPD or something like that, which ran from 1968 to 1975. Bewitched ran from 1964 to 1972. That was a fantasy comedy show. And MASH, which stands for Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, which ran from 1972 to 1983, which was a comedy drama historical fiction. MASH, by the way, was a remake of its own. It was a remake of a movie that came out before that. So we're doing a remake of a remake if you pick MASH. Now, on the movie side, you can choose from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was a science fiction movie, came out in 1977, or Gloria, which came out in 1980, which was a crime drama, When Harry Met Sally, a romantic comedy, came out in 1989, or The Birdcage, came out in 1996, which was a straight-up comedy. Now, the links to the right of each of these takes you to a synopsis of each of these. Now, you should certainly go out and read the synopsis of each one, but if you can get your hands on any of these to actually watch them, whether you find them on YouTube or find them on Netflix or wherever you can get your hands on them, I would suggest watching them over reading the synopsis. You will get a much better experience actually watching them. Now, of course, you might be familiar with some of these already, in which case you already know them, which is great. But if you're not familiar with them, go find them, try to watch them. So decide whether or not you want to do a television show or a movie, and decide which one you want to do. Check out a bunch of them. See what you like. Now, once you've chosen which one you want to work on, you're going to decide to change it into a new genre and subgenre. So, for example, The Fugitive was an action-adventure show. Maybe in your version, you're going to turn it into a comedy. So that's the idea, is you're going to flip it on its head and turn it into a different genre. So a romantic comedy could become a horror movie, for example. A science fiction movie could become a buddy cop movie. I don't know. You get to be creative here. This is where you can be fully creative and do whatever you would like. If you are unsure what the genre choices are, there's 2 links here. This is a comprehensive list of genres for film and television, and this here is a comprehensive list of genres for subgenres rather for film and television. So be sure to check that out. So once you've decided on your TV show or movie, and then you've decided on which new genre and subgenre you want to turn it into, you are going to write a one-page plot summary of your newly imagined movie or TV show. Now remember, a plot summary is a lot shorter than a synopsis. Synopsis can be multiple pages and goes into a lot of detail. We're not actually making the movie or the TV show here. You're just imagining a new version of it. So a one-page plot summary is plenty. Okay, that's all you need. Be sure to check out the class writing guidelines so that you know how to format your writing and write that one-page plot summary, and then that is what we're going to be turning in next. But, of course, if you go back here, you'll notice it's not due this week. That is your homework. So you have plenty of time to work on this. So you can take time this week to pick your TV show or your movie, do some research into it, watch it, maybe watch it a couple of times, and then kind of do a little creative writing about what you want to turn it into, okay? All right, so that is it for this week. If you need me, you know where to find me. You can email me or hop on to the Monday or Friday Zoom office hours. I'm always happy to help out, so be sure to poke in if you need me. Otherwise, I will see you soon.